Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Madhur Bharatiya, a law researcher based in Bangalore and a member of NAJAR. This workshop is being organized by NAJAR, that is the National Alliance for Justice, Accountability and Rights, which is a pan-India democratic forum comprised of students, lawyers, researchers and educators who are committed to the values of the Constitution and the preservation of the rule of law. This workshop comes in the backdrop of the national campaign launched in the aftermath of the FIRs against human rights defenders who have been fighting against incidents of hate speech and hate crimes. Uh, more recently, the attempted arrests were against Nadeem Khan and Mohammed Zubair in Bangalore. And for this workshop, we had the privilege of having with us some distinguished legal practitioners who have conducted these workshops in the past as well. Naveen Gautam, the moderator for the workshop, has been working as a Dalit rights activist and human rights lawyer since almost a decade now. He is also an international human rights law researcher working on modern slavery as well as caste and descent-based discrimination. Over to you, Naveen.
Thank you, Madhur. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you, Madhur, for the introduction. And of course, welcome all. सभी साथियों का welcome है सभी साथी को शुक्रिया एक सबसे पहले कि आपने रविवार के दिन टाइम निकाला और Madhur has already given a broad introduction about what we are going to have a discussion upon. First of all, namaskar, zindabad, jai bhim, johar. And of course, this as we gather here, it is crucial to reflect on and critically analyze the present day situation in our country. And we keep talking about this, but are we taking enough steps to move forward in this regard? And of course, we are living in a time where the foundational principles of justice, we talk about constitution, we talk about equality, we talk about fraternity, they are increasingly being challenged by divisive narratives, by various actions, and of course, hate speech being one of the major factor which is attached to this, which targets specific communities, especially Dalits, Adivasis, Muslims, and Christian minorities, and other groups, other marginalized groups, which often leads to heightened social tension and marginalization, further marginalization, I would say, and in terms of persecution, in terms of attacks, in terms of attacks on human rights defenders, as Madhur has very specifically mentioned. And as we delve into this discussion, it's also important to remind ourselves that hate speech is not merely a matter of words. It's a precursor to violence. It leads to violence, and it's a warning which is leading to strong violence against marginalized communities. And it doesn't mean that it only impacts the marginalized communities, it impacts the whole nation, everyone, when these things actually turn into violence. And of course, we have constitutional and legal mechanisms in place, which we will discuss today. And especially like our Grundnorm very specifically talks about Article 14, 15, 19, 21, which are very much strongly designed to uphold equality and curb acts that promote enmity. But the implementation itself often falls short, as we know, particularly when those targeted communities belong to the marginalized groups. And of course, there is a significant gap in interpretation of these principles by the state machineries and legal practitioners, and often leading to attacks on human rights defenders ultimately, which are being prosecuted, which are being attacked if they raise voices against hate speeches. And of course, as Madhur very specifically mentioned, Nadeem and Zubair are the recent examples. और शायद में नफरत फैलाने वाले भाषणों की हम अक्सर चर्चा करते हैं, बातें करते हैं सोशल मीडिया के माध्यम से, पोस्ट डालते हैं, बट कोई निर्णायक कार्यवाही करने में हम भी विफल रहे हैं, और साथ में राज्य स्तर पे सरकारें, जुडिशरी, न्यायपालिका भी विफल रही है. न केवल अपराधियों को बढ़ावा देता है, बल्कि पीड़ितों को और बुरी तरीके से परेशान करता है. और अक्सर जब कोई आवाज उठाता है, खासतौर पे दलित, आदिवासी या अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय से, तो और ज्यादा उनको सुरक्षित महसूस करता है. हमें यह सवाल करना चाहिए कि क्या मौजूदा तंत्र पर्याप्त है, क्या हम तैयार हैं इन भाषणों के को रोकने के लिए, ये नफरत वाले भाषणों को रोकने के लिए क्या सक्षम प्लेटफॉर्म है? अगर सक्षम प्लेटफॉर्म है तो हम किस हद तक साथ में, राज्य किस हद तक साथ में, न्यायपालिका किस हद तक इन भाषणों पर लगाम लगा सकती है, और जो इनके खिलाफ आवाज उठाते हैं उनके लिए हमारे पास क्या, या राज्य के पास क्या रेमेडी है, क्या सुझाव है? So this panel today offers us an opportunity to not only highlight incidents of hate speeches and their devastating consequences, but also to explore strategies to counter this residing heights of intolerance and throw some light on the legal and constitutional mechanisms. So I repeat, we have two speakers, we have two friends of ours who will further take us along in this journey. And the first speaker friend who will go first is Ms. Lara Jesani. Lara has been practicing law in Indian courts for over a decade and is currently an independent litigator, with her primary practice based out of Bombay High Court and National Green Tribunal. She engages in public policy and advocacy work on democratic rights and civil liberty issues, and in human rights and legal education. Lara was one of the lawyers in the PUCL petition in which the Supreme Court directed that state should suo motu register FIRs in incidents of hate speeches. I repeat, Lara PUCL की उस याचिका से जुड़ी हुई थी जिसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने स्वतः संज्ञान लिया था कि हेट स्पीचेस से जुड़े एफआईआर दर्ज होनी चाहिए, जो भी राज्य को उस पे कोई ना कोई कठोर कदम उठाना चाहिए. सो in this workshop today, in this meeting today, Lara will be giving an overview of the laws governing hate speech, domestic and international law. She will also share her experience of domestic litigation around hate speeches cases as well as advocacy. Lara, you're welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to switch off my video because I've just been getting calls in respect of a case. So thank you very much, Madhur, and thank you for the generous introduction from the moderator as well. We will be talking about hate speech today at a time when the manner and spread of hate speech has become quite a big concern in the last couple of years. And also at a time when we're seeing the misuse of these very laws, which are for the protection of the people and protection of the communities against hate speech, like we saw in the case of Nadeem, where Section 196 of the BNS has been applied against him. Similarly, we've seen also Zubair, who has been a big advocate of action against fake news as well as against hate speech, again has been slapped with a case under Section 152, which is the new age sedition under the BNS. So we're looking at two aspects of how the law has really played out. One is in terms of the rising hate speech, uncontrollable hate speech, or uncontrolled hate speech. We're seeing the state has not been taking action in cases of hate speech. And the second, the manner in which the hate speech has instead been used against defenders, against people from the minority community, those who are challenging the state, and marginalized groups. So we are seeing this as an increasing trend in both directions. First and foremost, to just talk a little about hate speech. Hate speech, we know per se what hate speech is. For us to identify hate speech is actually not so much of a problem as they try to make it out, right? The question over here, however, is that, where does the ambiguity lie, and where does the prosecution for hate speech really fail? So we look at the definition of hate speech only in terms of the manner in which hate speech has been interpreted. There is no distinguish hate speech. For instance, if we see or identify hate speech, for instance, if we see, there is a vitriolic call to kill Muslims, we know it is hate speech. It is inciting speech. It's also a call to violence. If they say that a person from belonging to a particular community, does not have a right to live for XYZ reasons, we know that this is a hate speech. These are very clear instances of hate speech. If someone says that a person because they belong to a particular community, they are evil, or that they are, that they are not equal human beings, then we know that this is hate speech. So some of the instances of hate speech are extremely, easy to define. In the Supreme Court case of Pawasi Balai Sangathan, hate speech was held to be an effort to marginalize individuals based on their membership in a group. Using expression that exposes the group to hatred, hate speech seeks to delegitimize the group in the eyes of the majority, reducing their social standing and acceptance within society. So what the case basically held was that the speech which has been used in order to incite hatred amongst a particular community for another community is what hate speech would mean. It would also lower the social acceptance of the affected group in society. Hate speech therefore rises beyond causing distress to individual group members. So this is not just a crime which is being committed against individual group members. It has a societal impact. Hate speech lays the groundwork for later broad attacks on vulnerable groups that can range from discrimination to ostracism to segregation, deportation, violence, and in the most extreme cases, to genocide. So hate speech has genocidal potential, and that is why it is extremely important to curb hate speech. Now, this is, a very important, very important understanding that has been given of hate speech, not to look at it just as, a criticism of a particular community or basically a dislike for a particular community. This is a very deliberate means of inciting hatred between communities, and this hatred can last through generations. This hatred can be passed through generations. So this has a very huge impact on society. So hate speech cannot just be looked at, okay, if somebody doesn't like someone from another community, then, what's the problem with it? Let them not like. It's their opinion. No, hate speech is not an opinion. Hate speech is not free speech, right? So while free speech needs to be protected, free speech does not lower a community in the eyes of others. While hate speech lowers a community in the eyes of others, it leads to societal divisions. It can cause harm to those who are affected and those who are subject to the hate speech. So it's a very important understanding that we need to have at all points of time when we talk about hate speech. Now, in the case of Amish Devgan versus Union of India, a two-judge bench of the Supreme Court had refused to grant reliefs in a petition to dismiss criminal proceedings against a television journalist who had used derogatory language against a Muslim saint. Now, in this judgment, the court emphasized on the importance of protecting hate speech while also protecting group dignity and unity of the nation by prescribing speech which threatens that dignity or unity. So if there is a speech which threatens the dignity of members of a community or threatens the unity, of the nation, then it has to be, dealt with strictly. It has to be prosecuted. And in this case also, the a very important, relief which was actually, granted was that first the quashing was not allowed. But most importantly, the investigation which had been started against the journalist, the journalist was asked to cooperate in it, and that the investigation could not be stopped, that measures would have to be taken against the journalist. This is a very important, again, a case which looked at hate speech. Now, very recently, in the Tehseen Poonawala case, and then later on in the, Ashwini Kumar case, we saw, which was also accompanied by a writ petition later on by journalist Shaheen Abdullah, who runs Maktub Media. He had filed a petition in this case in 2023, seeking directions from the Supreme Court because cases are not being registered, because FIRs are not being filed in cases of hate speech. So in this particular case, several interim applications are in fact been filed in order to also not just look at prosecuting hate speech, but also look at preventing hate speach. So both these nature of reliefs had been asked for in the course of the hearings for these petitions and the different IAs that came to be filed. Now, mainly the IAs were filed when there was an announcement that a hate speech yatra or a hate speech morcha was going to be made, or they were filed after hate speech had been made in order to get certain action to be initiated against those who were the offenders of hate speech. Now, in the Shaheen Abdullah case, PUCL also filed an intervention application in 2023. We basically filed from Maharashtra because the situation in Maharashtra after November 2022 was really dire. In November 2022, there was a Shraddha Walkar case, a case in which an interfaith couple, the woman had been murdered. She was in a domestic relationship, and the man was a Muslim. And this was used in order to spread vitriol in the name of love jihad. And what really, made it worse was that immediately after this case, this I think was on 22nd of November when the case got really big, the Maharashtra government passed a government resolution, what we call as GR, basically setting up a committee which will look into interfaith marriages and will basically collect information on any kind of interfaith relationships and marriages and will monitor them. Now, this is a complete invasion of privacy, and it was basically putting, the case of Shraddha Walkar was a domestic abuse case, a domestic violence case, which needs to be condemned and it has to be strongly prosecuted. But at the same time, what this was done is it was made as a marker to attack interfaith relationships and especially Hindu-Muslim relationships. This was used in order to fuel communal propaganda throughout the state. What started after this were rallies for love jihad, basically asking for anti-conversion law and an end to love jihad. Now, love jihad became this big nara. First, to begin with, love jihad, the word love jihad itself is hate speech. But this became a nara all across Maharashtra. And the Hindu Jan Akrosh Morcha, which was being organized by Sakal Hindu Samaj. Sakal Hindu Samaj is a conglomerate of several right-wing Hindu organizations. It includes Sanatan Sanstha, Hindu Jan Jagriti Samiti, VHP, and several other, Bajrang Dal, and several other organizations are part of this. They started holding these Hindu Jan Akrosh Morcha, demanding for a Hindu state, number one, and second, asking for anti-conversion law, propagating love jihad, propagating land jihad, economic boycott of Muslims, and several such other illegal demands, patently illegal demands, which are being made through that platform. Now, in this circumstances, from like November end, this started, and it went on. So in January, by then, it was happening at an alarming rate. There were many of these morchas which were being organized, and on 26th of January, a morcha was organized in Bombay, in Dadar Shivaji Park. So at that time, in fact, a lot of people actually came to know about a lot of civil society organizations also came to know about what was happening, and we started sending in police complaints. Police complaints were sent through PUCL, as well as we formed a collective. A collective had been formed in order to look at this interfaith GR and the love jihad issue, and the kind of communal propaganda that was happening in the name of love jihad. And this committee called as a Salokha Samiti was formed, a collective of several, more than 20 organizations which got together and started issuing letters to the DGP and also to the Commissioner of Police and the Superintendent of Police, and in order to prevent these rallies, number one. Second, where the rallies have taken place, to start filing FIRs against those who are organizing the rallies. Also, we filed an intervention application in the Supreme Court, basically asking for action against those who are indulging in hate speech, and for the police to file FIRs against them, and also asking for preventive reliefs in order to stop these rallies, which were openly taking place. Even the poster invites of these rallies, or the posters they were putting up publicly, the banners that they were putting up would clearly say love jihad, land jihad, and all the Hindu Rashtra, and all of these various illegal demands were part of their posters. So we were asking them to stop. And this third thing was that all those who were already known to indulge in hate speech, they should not be allowed to address these rallies. because they are repeat offenders and they should not be given a platform. So these are some of the basic reliefs that we had asked for. Now, in this Supreme Court case, 3 orders came to be passed. One was in October 2022, and later on, that order was expanded in January 2023. And then the last order was on 28th April 2023. I'll share all the 3 orders over here once I'm done. By this order, the Supreme Court passed a direction directing the police to take suo motu file FIRs against hate speech offenders. And in the event they did not do that, they would be liable for contempt. Now, this is a very important order that came to be passed by the Supreme Court. And this order was used by many of us to get a lot of FIRs filed. However, what has happened now, and now coming to the challenges that we are seeing in the cases that are pending right now on hate speech, what has happened is, even though we have successfully managed to file many FIRs or use the order in order to file FIRs either ourselves or through community or through other organizations who have taken the effort to file these FIRs, what has actually happened is that there is no arrest that takes place after the filing of the FIRs. That is number one. Second, the investigations in these cases are not done by the police. And third is that in none of these cases, even which have taken place 1.5 to 1 year back, charge sheets have not been filed. Now, the reason why the charge sheet is not filed is one of the biggest impediments to hate speech law in India, is that in order to file for any court to take cognizance of a hate speech case, they are required to get the sanction from the state government. Now, the state government obviously holds these sanctions. So we have some cases which are pending in the Bombay High Court. I have cases pending in respect of 2 FIRs, where the court has asked the police to and also asked the government to provide the sanction on an immediate basis. The sanction was being delayed against the BJP vice president, who had been making hate speeches in Maharashtra in this Hindu Jan Akrosh morchas repeatedly, and the sanction was not given, even though pursuant to our application and pursuant to an order which was passed by the court on 4th February 2023, where videography had been, the Supreme Court had directed that videography should be done of these, hate speech rallies. Videography was done, in fact, by the police. So they had direct evidence of the person making hate speech. But still, they have delayed the granting of the sanction. In spite of the content being recorded by them, they sent the content to the forensic analysis and waited for the forensic analysis report that was also used as an excuse in order to delay the sanction. Until now, the sanction has not come in. In fact, that matter is kept on the 18th of December. And if there are any updates, I can definitely provide them. But these are 2 matters which are pending for sanction. If sanction is granted, it will be one of the first cases where sanction will be granted in Maharashtra. But unfortunately, so far, there has been massive delay in the granting of sanction. So this is the 3rd hurdle, and a very big hurdle that we are facing. Some of the things that, have also happened, and this is one thing that, we look at when we look at hate speech. While hate speech is increasing and incidences of hate speech is increasing, we've also seen in states like Maharashtra an increasing incidence of hate crimes that are taking place. And we have a couple of writ petitions. I have a writ petition which is pending in the Bombay High Court on the lynching that took place in Satara in September 2023, where people who were going for namaz were attacked by the same group of people who were organizing these morchas and who were linked to these morchas and who were involved in the hate speech. Preceding that, the cause that was given to incite this violence was a fake post that had been put up in the name of a Muslim boy. And that fake post, there's no evidence that that post ever existed, but a screenshot of that post was printed and put up all over town and also sent on WhatsApp groups, which inflared, tensions, and it also led to the communal violence. But the communal violence was guided by the same groups that were involved in hate speech earlier, and that is also a case of linkage that we're trying to make. In that case, the entire group of people who were going to offer namaz were attacked. The mosque was vandalized. A lot of people were seriously assaulted. And one of the people, Nurul Shikalgar, a 32-year-old, IT professional, was lynched. And there is a case which we have filed in respect of that investigation in order to transfer it to a special investigating team. So that's another case that is pending right now. But even in this, those who are responsible for commanding the violence, those who basically control the troops who engage in violence, are the ones that are not getting implicated. So one of the biggest reliefs is to include the name of one of the leaders from the party who was involved in giving hate speech and communalizing that entire area, and also in a conspiracy to cause this communal violence. So these are the kind of cases, and we can see direct linkages of cases of hate crime with cases with these instances of hate speech. So prosecuting hate speech becomes an extremely important part of the work that we have to do. Now, how much time do I have left? Sorry, I just want to decide whether I should talk about some aspects or not.
5 more minutes, Lara.
5 more minutes. Okay, all right. So then I'll just try to get to the advocacy related work. Now, some of the major things that we feel are necessary in cases like this is, first and foremost, we have to identify hate speech and actively monitor it. Actively monitoring it means, keeping track of what is happening in the media, what is happening in social media, also creating groups within our organizations who can, at least identify and communicate information on any hate speech that is coming up either on Facebook, Instagram, or on Twitter, but most importantly on WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp is one of the biggest mediums of hate speech propagation that we see as far as the online media is concerned. The digital space is concerned. And that's where I feel, one of the biggest places that we lack, access, especially as activists, or especially as members of civil society organizations, is to get information of hate speech being circulated on WhatsApp. So it's very important, from all, we see forwards coming in. There are also forwards that come on society groups, on alumni groups, on family groups. Many of this, we look at them, we ignore them. We're like, oh my God, this is innocent, or maybe they don't know enough, or I don't want to engage with them. But it is very important for us to track down the source of the hate and also to be able to prosecute it. So this is a really important task that we are, left with. Second is what happens in the mainstream media and the media. You also have a lot of YouTube channels and a lot of other subscribed channels which propagate hate speech. We see hate speech coming in the form of art these days. You must have read the book on Hindutva pop. We had organized a very big book discussion in Bombay, and at that time, Kunal Purohit, who is the author of the book, had spoken about how he had, met many of these groups who are indulging in this, hateful songs and videos that they have been, circulating on YouTube, and they're also doing, gigs for in different parts of the state and different parts of the country, actually. And how catchy and how people have been picking these songs up and using them all the time. We also saw when the, unfortunately for us in Maharashtra, when the inaugural, ceremony happened in Maharashtra after the BJP and Shinde and Ajit Pawar alliance won the state assembly recently. There was, one of these Hindutva bands which performed at Azad Maidan. And Azad Maidan is actually the designated place for protests in Bombay. And this is such a huge, kind of a mockery of that space also that was made. So this popular content that we see in the form of, a very hateful popular content that is also being circulated. Again, we need to first and foremost, be able to identify and take action in respect of this. Of course, there is a lot of hate speech that we are seeing around in the digital space. And Manavi will also be talking about some of the things related to that. So I won't get into a lot of detail. But it's very difficult for us to keep track sometimes, to even respond to all of this. But it has become extremely important for us to take urgent stock. The second thing is, once of course we identify, the easiest way to identify is when a public morcha happens, when somebody makes a public speech. And immediately, as we know who the perpetrators of hate speech are and the details of the incident, it's important for us to take the evidence together, whether it is the video, the audio, or transcripts of the hate speech that has been given, and look at filing an FIR. An FIR is a first information report. It is a police complaint that we go to the police station and file. And the second important thing is to pursue and follow up the FIR. And if FIR is not being registered, to also take it to the higher officials. We have to be able to, contact the Deputy Commissioner of Police or the Commissioner of Police at times in order to get an FIR registered. So that escalation of the complaint is a very important part of it. It is also provided in the criminal procedure, which is now under the BNSS. The third and very important step is, if there is no investigation taking place, if things are not moving, the person is not being arrested, one can even write to the Director General of Police, and also look at if the instances are repeating, if there is no action, if there is no steps being taken by the police, the final step is also to go to court. We have been going under the writ jurisdiction, the Bombay High Court, but these are options that can be availed of if things are really bad, and especially if a person has been indulging, they are repeatedly indulging in such kind of hate speech. So these are some of the things that we can keep in mind when we look at what kind of action we can take. If there is online hate speech, there are reporting mechanisms which are provided. But before using these reporting mechanisms to report abuse, it is important to take a screenshot of the hate speech, download the video, write down the link so that we have evidence of it, so that we can also file police complaint. Otherwise, what also happens is nowadays, and this also happened in the case that I was referring to in the Bombay High Court, which I'm currently prosecuting on the hate speech, where as soon as we identified and complaints started going in respect of the hate speech, the content was removed from Facebook. Earlier, the videos had been shared on Facebook, but later on, that content was removed. So it's very important to preserve that evidence, so that advocacy can be done. I have been asked to conclude, so I'll leave it here, but we can then have further discussions later on. Yeah.
I think bringing up the cases is pretty important, and that was thanks to you for all the efforts you're making. And also looking at two different aspects which you have talked about, I'll also try to translate for our friends who have requested for a Hindi translation. So I think Lara ने बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से दो चीज़ों के बारे में बात की है. जब हम हेट स्पीच को देखते हैं, जब हम ऐसा हिंसात्मक भाषण की बात करते हैं, पहला जो है लारा कह रही है कि एक अनकंट्रोल्ड हेट स्पीच है जो फैलती चली जा रही है, जिसपे किसी भी तरीके का कोई भी निरंतर नहीं है. और दूसरा, अगर कोई उसके खिलाफ आवाज भी उठा रहा है तो उसके खिलाफ केसेस निरंतर रूप से बढ़ते चले जा रहे हैं, चाहे वो आप जुबैर को देखे, चाहे वो नदीम को देखे. तो वो दो एस्पेक्ट्स बहुत स्ट्रांगली, मजबूती रूप से लारा उस पर चर्चा करते नजर आ रही हैं. और साथ में धारा 197, क्योंकि अभी पूरी की पूरे हमारा क्रिमिनल प्रोसीजर, पीनल कोड हमारा चेंज हुआ है, बदला है. हालांकि बहुत ज्यादा अंतर नहीं आया, बट कुछ धाराएं ऐसी हैं जो कहीं ना कहीं ह्यूमन राइट्स डिफेंडर्स के अगेंस्ट और स्ट्रांगली यूज की जा रही है. तो 197 की बात करती है धारा 197 197, जिसको लगाया गया है जुबैर के खिलाफ. और तीन जजमेंट्स, तीन निर्णय की बात की है लारा ने. पहला प्रवासी भलाई संगठन है, जहाँ पे हम बात करते हैं कि हम एक समुदाय को क्यों टारगेट कर रहे हैं, क्या उनका जीने का अधिकार नहीं है, खास तौर पे जब हम हेट स्पीचेस को लेकर बात करते हैं. और सिर्फ और सिर्फ इंडिविजुअल, सिर्फ और सिर्फ एक इंसान नहीं, जब हम हेट स्पीच की बात करते हैं तो एक पूरे समुदाय के खिलाफ आग फैलाने की एक कोशिश की जाती है, जो ऐसा नहीं है कि उस समय रुक जाएगी, बट बहुत ही मजबूती रूप से एक जीनोसाइड की तरफ मूव कर रही है. जीनोसाइड मतलब जब बहुत सारे लोगों के खिलाफ हिंसाएं, बहुत सारे लोगों के खिलाफ मृत्यु की जाती है। तो उसकी तरफ हेट स्पीच कहीं ना कहीं ये ऐसे भाषण निरंतर रूप से मूव करते हुए नजर आ रहे हैं। और हमें जब हम संविधान की बात करते हैं तो हमें फ्री स्पीच और हेट स्पीच के बारे में, हम हमें अभिव्यक्ति के अधिकार के बारे में और घृणात्मक भाषण के बारे में हमें बात करने की जरूरत है। जहाँ पे अमीश देवगन और तहसीन पूनावाला के दो जजमेंट्स को कोट करते हुए लारा बताती हैं कि अगर किसी भी एक समुदाय के खिलाफ या फिर किसी भी एक इंडिविजुअल के खिलाफ, किसी भी एक इंसान के खिलाफ किसी भी तरीके का भाषण बोला गया है जो घृणा फैलाने का थोड़ी सी भी उसमें कोशिश की गई है, तो एक बहुत मजबूत कदम, कठोर कदम सरकार को उठाना चाहिए। और बहुत ही शुरुआती स्तर पे उठाना चाहिए, इससे पहले कि वो बहुत ही बड़े स्तर पे बढ़े। और नुपुर शर्मा का आप लोगों ने केस सुना होगा, जो काफी ज्यादा एक समय पे आगे बढ़ा था, कोविड के आसपास की बात है। उसके बाद तहसीन पूनावाला के बारे में बात करती हैं लारा, जहाँ पे हमें सिर्फ प्रोसिक्यूशन या फिर सिर्फ हमें ये नहीं देखना चाहिए कि कैसे किसी ने अगर हेट स्पीच फैलाने की कोशिश की है तो उसके खिलाफ सिर्फ कार्रवाई हो, बट हम उसको रोकें कैसे, उस पे गाइडलाइंस के माध्यम से। तहसीन पूनावाला केस एक ऐसा था जो आया था जिसमें गाइडलाइंस भी आई थी उस पे। और हम सभी साथियों ने, everyone might have seen what happened to Shraddha Walker case, because as mentioned by Lara very specifically, it was actually a domestic abuse case। वो एक घरेलू हिंसा का मामला था, जो जिस तरीके से उसको लव जिहाद का मामला बनाया गया और उसके खिलाफ जितनी भी रैलीज निकाली गई, जब हम बहुत ही स्पष्ट रूप से लव जिहाद रैलीज, और बहुत सारे हिंदू संगठनों ने उसमें पार्टिसिपेट किया, भाग लिया। और जिस हिसाब से उस स्पीच एक हिंदू और मुस्लिम पार्टनर्स को देखा जाता था, लव जिहाद का मुद्दा उठाया जाता था, वो खुद में एक खौफ पैदा करने वाली एक स्थिति बन के आई थी। और चुनौतियों के तौर पे बहुत स्पष्ट है, जैसा हम और भी केसेस में देख रहे हैं। जब हम एट्रोसिटीज की बात करते हैं, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट atrocities against Dalits, when we talk about atrocities against religious minorities, when we talk about access to justice issues very specifically, the same things which we are facing are with the hate speech also, because it's very difficult to, sometimes लॉज एन एफआईआर, एक एफआईआर लॉन्च करना बहुत मुश्किल होता है। बट लारा ने कहा है कि हमने काफी सारी एफआईआर लॉन्च तो की हैं, बट जब हम इन्वेस्टिगेशन और चार्जशीट नेक्स्ट स्टेप्स की तरफ मूव करते हैं तो देयर इज अ मैसिव चैलेंज, प्लेथोरा ऑफ ऑब्स्टिकल्स विच कम ऑन द वे, आते हैं रास्ते में। और वो एक पूरा का पूरा न्याय तक पहुंच का रास्ता रोकने की कोशिश रहता है। और हम सभी को पता है कि जो हिंसा कर रहे हैं वही सुरक्षित हैं अभी के समय में। तो whosoever is inflicting violence, whosoever is spreading hate speeches, using these tools to spread violence, are the one who are feeling most safe and protective. So इस पे भी हमें लगता है कि और हो सकता है आने वाले समय में हम और इस पे चर्चा कर सकते हैं कि कैसे और मैकेनिज्म्स का इस्तेमाल हम करें। एंड फाइनली बहुत स्पेसिफिकली लारा ने बोला था कि कैसे हम अपने स्तर पे मॉनिटर और इनको रोक सकते हैं, हाउ वी कैन somehow, if when we talk about advocacy for hate speech, so इसको हम कैसे अपने स्तर पे समझ सकते हैं कि हाँ अभी हेट स्पीच है। और ये नहीं कि हेट स्पीच सिर्फ और सिर्फ यूट्यूब या फिर ऑनलाइन माध्यम या पब्लिक डिस्कोर्स में ही हो रही है। हेट स्पीचेस लगभग आपके फैमिली ग्रुप्स में होती हैं, व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप्स पे होती हैं, जो आपको समझना पड़ेगा, आइडेंटिफाई करना पड़ेगा। और आप लोग चैट बॉक्स में देखिए, वी हैव शेयर्ड मोस्ट ऑफ द मटेरियल्स इन द चैट बॉक्स फॉर यू। वी हैव केस लॉज, उसमें केस लॉज दिए हुए हैं, उन केस लॉज का आप इस्तेमाल समझ सकते हैं, और कुछ जरूरत हो हमको कम्युनिकेट कांटेक्ट भी कर सकते हैं उसके माध्यम से। बट हमें बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया लारा फॉर ब्रिंगिंग अप दिस होल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ हेट स्पीचेस एंड ऑफ कोर्स द वे यू हैव डेल्ट विद ऑल दीज केसेस। बिग कंग्रेचुलेशन एंड बेस्ट ऑफ लक फॉर द फ्यूचर big fight, big struggle which is coming up, no doubt. Now I would request Manavi to take the stage and take us further in this journey. Manavi is a human rights lawyer and researcher, and she specifically monitors the patterns of news coverage, their relationships to people and politics in Kannada media through her work with Campaign Against Hate Speech. मानवी अत्री मानवाधिकार वकील और शोधकर्ता है। वह कैंपेन अगेंस्ट हेट स्पीच के साथ काम के जरिए कन्नड़ मीडिया में समाचार कवरेज के पैटर्न, लोगों से उनके संबंधों और राजनीति पर विशेष रूप से नजर रखती हैं, मॉनिटर करती हैं। एंड शी ऑल्सो अपीयर्स बिफोर सेल्फ रेगुलेटरी बॉडीज इन केस ऑफ अनएथिकल reportage. I repeat, unethical reportage by the media as a way to challenge media impunity. And her co-authored work includes Wages of Hate, Journalism in Dark Times, criminalizing the practice of faith and from communal policing to hate crimes, or report on Dakshina Kannada. In this workshop, Manvi will be talking about the need for collective response against hate speech, sharing ground experience for Karnataka and challenges faced. Manvi से request करते हैं कि Manvi, please take the stage and take us further on this thing. Thank you, Manvi.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you everybody from NAJAR for organizing this and calling me today to share some of our experience. So I'm going to speak about three words that I feel are at the heart of this work and this fight against hate, of struggle, hope, and accountability. And these three words of कोशिश, उम्मीद और जवाबदेही के बारे में मैं बात करना चाहूँ. और ये everything that I'm going to share is from a collective experience of a campaign called Campaign Against Hate Speech based in Karnataka. And so there are many people who are, mind you, not lawyers. They are students, academicians, journalists, parents, business professionals, IT professionals, people who are simply just extremely affected in their personal lives and in the way that they're consuming hate and they're seeing the environment polarized to such an extent. I want to start talking about the struggle aspect of it, which is the struggle of how has hate affected us. I feel like in all the response that we articulate around hate and the politics of hate, whether it is about speech, whether it's about crime, within the human rights groups also, there's a degree of normalization in which we speak, saying we don't emphasize enough as much as we need to about what does the consumption of hate do to all of us, to the society that we live in, and to our dreams of a fraternal, equal, free India. And I want to start there because I feel it's really important to think about for all of us. There's a reason everybody has taken out time on a Sunday and joined this workshop, because there is something that this hatred is doing to us. Yes, we are seeing what it is doing when calling for accountability is doing for people like Naveen and Zubair and many more like them. But there is also something it's personally doing to all of us and the world that we want to live in and our dreams of that world. And it's on that premise that the struggle of negotiating everyday relationships, negotiating long-term work, negotiating society and communities, that our understanding needs to be founded on. Yes, law will give us the tools to look at how do we do this collective response? What is it that we need to do? Who do we need to approach? But the thrust and the urgency for it, which I often feel we have to do more of this kind of work, is really needed. And I also want to emphasize the starting point of it being that there is this appetite for hate that we have is because of the question of caste. And it's because of how we have all internalized, and there's an internalization of caste in the Indian society that is there. That is why now the targets have shifted, but hatred and this politics of hatred is not new. And so our work in Karnataka has been focused on looking at bringing people together and seeing how do we collectively respond to this question of hate and the politics of hate. Because of the struggle to look at the broader framework of politics of hate, we have limited ourselves to the legal frameworks of hate speech and hate crimes. And in doing this, I also want to start from the basically in the pyramid of hate, if you look at it theoretically and conceptually also. At the bottom of it comes the biases and the stereotypes, which basically come out often as jokes, which come out as humor, which come out as comments that are made about some community, which are based on basically trying to dehumanize them to a certain extent. And so these stereotypes and biases are supposed to be looked at from the constitutional lens, saying that there is an anti-stereotyping principle that has been laid down jurisprudentially in the Indian law by looking at the Nargesh Mirzakar judgment, by looking at the Hotel Association case of Punjab, where specifically the stereotyping cannot become state policy. And so that is the foundation on which that you think of combating the first block of this pyramid of hate. The second block of this pyramid of hate is discrimination. which, like you also said, Naveen, in the beginning, that constitutionally, when you look at it, there's a prohibition of discrimination, there's a right to equality on grounds of gender, sex, religion, caste, class, and so on, right? So that is the second thing in terms of looking at constitutional. But this shift from the criminalization that needs to happen for action, which is also there for discrimination when you specifically look at Prevention of Atrocities Act, when it comes to caste, but also when it specifically comes to the question of speech. So if you look at the question of hate speech, when that speech is basically based on these stereotypes and this discrimination, calling for, like Lara said, dehumanization and is marginalizing people further, it is basically not letting you access your own rights. So if you look at basically the question of marginalization, dehumanization, and citizenship together, you look at these three together and how they play a role and how a certain speech makes it impossible for a person who's already from a marginalized community, because you have dehumanized them, to access their citizenship rights. And that's sort of a pipeline in which you can understand it and how the far-reaching consequences of hate speeches happen. And then, like Lara emphasized, on how it leads to crimes and hate crimes. And in certain cases, you've also seen that the crimes of crime, which is often how it's often called, the crime of genocide. And I want to come back to the point about what is it that Zubair said. How many people in this Zoom call actually know what is the tweet that Zubair had posted? I don't know, people can type in the chat. कितने लोगों को मालूम है कि जुबैर की ने क्या ट्वीट डाला था जिसके खिलाफ उनके ऊपर एफआईआर हुई? रिस्पॉन्स नहीं है तो शायद जूम की भी दिक्कत है. इन पर्सन होते हैं तो थोड़ा समझ में आ पाता है. बट the tweet that he had put out was basically the transcription of exactly what Yati Narsingh Anand had said, which was saying that on the which was basically making a parallel between the Shera and asking for the Muslim, the basically a prophet to be, you know, put up in the effigies to be burnt in on those lines, right? And in this, he basically had the video as it is, which was posted from his Yati Narasimhanan's original account. And in response to that, he had basically quote tweeted him and basically mentioned the the UP police and asked them to take action. But then what happens is you see that Yati Narsingh Anand's aides come after him, and then you see that there is basically a protest that they do in Ghaziabad, where there is some kind of miscreants that are there, and there is some kind of scuffle that happens, which is essentially then blamed on Zubair. And the protest was for calling for an FIR against Zubair. And so you see in the way in which the entire law itself is inverted in that sense. So at such a time, when the polarization, normalization is there of this hate speech, and we're also seeing the relationship between speech and crime so crucially, what is it that we can do, right? What is it that we, as human rights lawyers, as human rights activists, that we can do? So within the campaign, three kinds of work that we have been doing, and we have found some degree of hope in that. The hope of a collective model of functioning together is in one, we have been continuously working with different communities to sit with them and understand what does hate do to them. How do they think that they need to fight hate speech in their communities? And what does the law offer them, right? What is it that the law can? That is one part of the work that we've been doing, in that we think there are many other people who are also doing this, right? There's many people like Lara was talking about PUCL doing it in Maharashtra. There is also Jharkhand Jan Vikas Mahasabha that has been doing it in Jharkhand. There is also CJP, Karwai Mohabbat. There are many other organizations doing this work. And so keeping all of that work together, this is one part of the work. The second part of the work is about, Lara largely spoke about Hindutva organizations, and she spoke about the nexus between the right-wing organizations and political powers, which should also result in failures of prosecution for basically hate speech cases. But there is another very important actor over here, which is the TV news. We've all seen this when it comes to Omar Khalid. We have seen this when it came to Sudha Bhardwaj. We have seen this when it came to even Nadine Bhai. That there have been calls on television for certain kind of action to be taken against them. And we have seen in their cases how the media has managed to make propaganda affect a person's life and liberty in entirety. And so to look at the question of media critically is something that we are very, very closely tied to, especially in Kannada and regional media. And the reason we do that is um, people think that English news is most consumed, but when you look at the statistics, it's the least consumed in terms of the comparative with respect to regional languages. And Karnataka also being the first state where Hindutva organizations have such a strong foothold, we felt it was important to look at the media organizations and the media coverage in Karnataka. And in the last 4 years of looking at this, we have seen the shift in which the media today speaks to the audience itself. Initially, the speaking was to still a neutral audience. Now we have seen the shift to it speaking to directly to a Hindutva audience. And in speaking to a Hindutva audience, there is direct calls for attacks when it comes to, say, for example, on Christians, by saying that if they're mass converting, that this is an act of terrorism, and if they are doing this, invoke these laws in the criminal penal code, in the IPC, to be able to take action against them. So we have seen these shifts happen through the time of starting from this CA protest to then COVID, to then what happened with the anti-conversion laws in Karnataka, and then what we all saw in terms of the hijab and the hijab ban order in Karnataka. And so we've seen a gradual progression, which we have documented. But what we've also been struggling and really deriving hope from in doing is the work of filing cases against these media channels. There are many people who argue that it's beyond repair. We should maybe boycott the media. We should possibly switch to alternative news. But the question that, as a campaign, we like to ask in response is that if um, this kind of a boycott was working, why is it that today Hindutva has such a popular purchase? Why is it that the news profits are basically increasing day by day? Why is it that Republic has launched not just a Hindi channel, but it also has a Bangla channel? It has acquired a Kannada channel, right? And so the response needs to be there. And the response we find in some degree of accountability, we have found in basically going to the media authorities. So if you look at the structure of television media, you and the print media. So for the for the print media, it's really simple. If there is any article that's written in a daily, in a magazine, in a newspaper, you can it all falls under the Press Council of India. It's a statutory body. It's a quasi-judicial body, which means that they have a retired judge along with other members of the parliament sit on this 14-member committee of the Press Council of India. And they have the powers to issue a censure, which essentially means that for 3 months, the newspaper is not supposed to be given an advertisement. And those of you who are here from the background of a journalist or understand how the news business works, is that the most stable source of income for journalists, for news organizations rather, is that through state advertisement. And so that is one way that we have found success also. So there was an article that was published in Star of Mysore, which is a daily based in Mysore, which basically called Muslims bad apples in a basket. Basically in this calling the bad apples in a basket, it was an editorial, and in the paragraphs thereafter, it basically specifically mentioned to saying that if the bad apples from the basket are not removed, then the entire basket will get rotten, which is to imply that there was a call implied as a call for genocide and to remove a particular population, where they don't make reference to the word Muslim at all, but they refer to the exact population of Muslims in India and so on. So we filed a complaint against it. It was a slow process. It took us 1.5 years, but against Star of Mysore, finally we got a censure. Similarly, for Vijay Karnataka, which is again a huge Kannada newspaper, one of the biggest Kannada newspapers that is there, they had published articles with Muslim men's faces on them, calling them Corona criminals. And in these articles, there was no evidence, no proof to say that they were super spreaders or they were spreading COVID. Initially, Vijay Karnataka basically thought that they were above the law and did not appear before the press council. Finally, a bailable warrant was issued against them, against the editor himself. And the next hearing, they appeared, and the order of censure was passed against them as well. The other instance that I want to share is actually something that you all may remember very close to during COVID. Um, this is about how the Muslims were blamed for the entire spread of Corona. We all remember this. We all saw this telecasted on our televisions. And at that point of time, this was just within 4 months of sort of the campaign coming together and collectivizing. And we started filing complaints before the self-regulatory bodies. So with television media, the structure now after the Cable Television Regulation Amendment Act is that it is the structure is that each news organization is mandated to be a part of a self-regulatory body. It's basically the excuse that each time a Sudarshan channel is taken to the Supreme Court, that is given by the Sudarshan channel or by the NBDSA, is that we don't want to have a common law because self-regulation, we as media and the fourth pillar, we should be self-regulated. So this self-regulation after the Cable Television Network Regulation Amendment has now become mandated. So each news organization is supposed to be a part of a self-regulatory body. So within the news organization, the first step is to file a complaint to the editor within 7 days of the program being there. After 14 days of no response, and no editor will respond. Over the last 4 years, we have filed more than 52 complaints, and no editor has ever responded to us across the board from English channels to Kannada channels. After 14 days, you file before one of the two organizations. As of right now in India, there are two new self-regulatory organizations. One is the News Broadcasting Digital Standards Authority, NBTSA. Second, the News Broadcasters Federation. Many of you here who are very senior activists will also remember this, that Arnab was basically a part of NBDSA with Republic. Because a fine was imposed on him and he was asked to apologize, he left and he started News Broadcasters Federation. But what you must remember about both of these organizations is that at least with the NBDSA, as Campaign Against Hate Speech, we have engaged with that length. We have appeared before them. And basically in 3 instances that I can point out of the many complaints that we have filed. The first being of News 18 Canada, where they had basically called them Corona criminals, Nizamuddin Markaz jihadis. They basically, the order came, and what we find most useful about that order is that in the order they recognize all of what we have discussed about hate speech having its dehumanizing potential and the potential of leading to genocide. And they go ahead and fine 1 lakh rupees against News 18 Canada. They ask them to air an apology at prime time. Similarly, for Times Now, they were censured. They were asked to pay a fine of 50,000. Suvarna News was asked to pay a fine of 50,000 again. Suvarna is Asianet Suvarna. It's a sister channel of like Asianet Malayalam that is there, which is far more widely known than the Kannada channel. I just want to show the apology. Is that okay right now? Naveen, can I share a screen?
Should I give you the access? I think you already have the access.
Just checking. taking a second to load.
Manavi, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm just making it full screen before everybody can see it. Just give me a second. Checking for sound. Can you all see the screen now?
Yeah, I mean, it still has not moved to your screen. Okay, now you
The
can.
black screen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
ನ್ಯೂಸ್ 18 ಕನ್ನಡ ವಿಷಾದ. ನ್ಯೂಸ್ 18 ಕನ್ನಡವು ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ 1, 2020 ದೇಶಕ್ಕೆ ಕೊರೋನಾ ವೈರಸ್ ಹಬ್ಬಿಸಿದ ದೆಹಲಿ ನಿಜಾಮುದ್ದೀನ್ ಮರ್ಕಸ್ ಹೇಗಿದೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾ? ಮತ್ತು ಏಪ್ರಿಲ್ 1, 2020 ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಿಂದ ದೆಹಲಿಯ ಜಮಾಯತ್ ಸಭೆಗೆ ಹೋದವರ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ಎಷ್ಟು ಎಂಬ 2 ವರದಿಗಳನ್ನು ಪ್ರಸಾರ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು, ನೀತಿ ಸಂಹಿತೆ ಮತ್ತು ಪ್ರಸಾರ ಮತ್ತು ಗುಣಮಟ್ಟದ ಪ್ರಕಾರ ಪ್ರಸಾರ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮ ಪಾಲಿಸಬೇಕಾದ ನಿಷ್ಪಕ್ಷಪಾತತೆ, ವಸ್ತುನಿಷ್ಠತೆ ಹಾಗೂ ತಟಸ್ಥತೆ ಕಾಪಾಡಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವುದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನಿಯಮ ಉಲ್ಲಂಘಿಸಿದ್ದು ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಪ್ರಸಾರವಾಗಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ವಿಷಾದ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸುತ್ತಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಜನಾಂಗೀಯ ಮತ್ತು ಧಾರ್ಮಿಕ ಸಾಮರಸ್ಯದ ಕುರಿತಾದ ವರದಿಗಾರಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರಸಾರ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮ ಪಾಲಿಸಬೇಕಾದ ನಿರ್ದಿಷ್ಟ ಮಾರ್ಗಸೂಚಿ ಅನುಸರಿಸುವುದರಲ್ಲೂ ನಿಯಮ ಉಲ್ಲಂಘನೆಯಾಗಿದೆ. ಯಾವುದೇ ಸಮುದಾಯವನ್ನು ಕೀಳು ಮಟ್ಟದಲ್ಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಸಮುದಾಯದಲ್ಲಿ ದ್ವೇಷ ಭಾವನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಸುವ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ನಮ್ಮದಾಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಎಂದು ಸ್ಪಷ್ಟಪಡಿಸುತ್ತೇವೆ. ಈ ವಿಷಯವನ್ನ ಭಾವೋದ್ರೇಕಗೊಳಿಸುವುದು ನಮ್ಮ ಉದ್ದೇಶವಾಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಬ್ರಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಮಾನದಂಡಗಳನ್ನು ಸುಧಾರಿಸುವ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನದಲ್ಲಿ NBSA ಜಾರಿಗೊಳಿಸಿದ ಕೋಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಥಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಬ್ರಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಗೈಡ್ಲೈನ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಬದ್ಧರಾಗಿರುತ್ತೇವೆ.
Yes, so I know many people will have questions of what does an apology do? The harm is already done. What does a one black sign do? Um, yes, sorry, the next YouTube video, please. Yes, so like I was saying, that many people will have those questions, and that's something we can all discuss is what is good strategy and what is useful. But as campaign, we really think that this is all building to a documentation of accountability, and only when we engage with systems will we be able to think of new alternatives of what is the recourse to looking at basically a news which is hate-free. Can we even imagine a fundamental right to keep news for the masses? Can we imagine what is the kind of work that we need to do for that, and what are the kind of systems we need? And so I want to end with that, and happy to have discussions and to basically listen to what you all think needs to be done in your context. I will also share something we do in basically our in-person workshops, which is a very simple fill in the blanks complaint, because people often think that the only people who can draft complaints are lawyers. And that's completely not true. You don't need to know the law in and out to draft a complaint. Yes, it helps. Yes, which is why what Lara shared really helps. But the understanding that and the identification is very instinctive for many of us. So I'm just going to share that over here to and basically help use that language. It is really just like a simple question and answer. Please feel free to use it. It's a common resource and Zindabad. Thank you.
Thank you, Manavi. We're just running short of time, but thanks. You concluded at the right time. Manavi, can I also request you to just summarize what the apology was because it's in Kannada? So,
Sure.
please,
Sorry.
thank you.
Yes. Oh, yes. I was going to do that with the time it slipped my mind. But basically, they read the title of the program, which was about Nizamuddin Markaz, and said that you know how Corona was spread because of the Jamaat Nizamuddin Markaz that happened in Delhi by the Muslims. And then it basically said that we were in the wrong. We apologize for being in violation for the code of ethics and the broadcasting standards that we have signed up to follow. And so this is basically the sum and substance of it. So this was for only 30 seconds, but as a campaign, we popularized it, we made it viral, we basically shared it with other people who were concerned. And yeah, that's really the sum.
Thank you, Manavi. While I summarize what Manavi actually talked about, we can also request participants to put their questions, queries, and comments in the chat box. जब तक मैं बताता हूँ कि मानवी ने क्या बोला, क्या बात की, सभी साथियों से निवेदन है कि आप लोग प्लीज़ अपने सवालों को चैट बॉक्स में डालें और मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा मधुर से कि आप प्लीज़ ध्यान रखें कि कौन सा सवाल आया जिससे कि हम सभी सवालों का जवाब दे सकें। आखिरी के 15 मिनट हमारे पास बचेंगे उनके जवाबों के जवाब देने के लिए। सो मैं मानवी और लारा से भी रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि हो सके समय तो आप भी उनका जवाब दे सकें तो बेहतर होगा। So broadly, what Manvi has talked about is how the channels, especially the regional language channels, have been used against, in spreading the hate speeches. And it didn't start recently. This has happened since Corona. I mean, this has been happening that since many years, no doubt. But since COVID, this has gained speed. और कोविड के बाद से जैसे हम सभी ने देखा था कैसे निजामुद्दीन में हुई एक बैठक को कोविड स्प्रेडर्स के तौर पे, कोविड क्रिमिनल्स के तौर पे वहाँ के सभी लोगों को बोला गया, वैसा देखा गया और काफ़ी न्यूज़ चैनल्स ने भी वैसे ही उसको पेश किया। एंड apart from this, Manvi also talks about caste and hate speech. Thanks, Manvi, for bringing up the caste aspect also, because which is very important कि कैसे जातिवाद हिंसा, जैसे जातिवाद क्यों एक मेजर कारण है, मुख्य कारण है हिंसात्मक भाषण से जुड़ा, क्योंकि आप किसी की पहचान, किसी के जीवन को अमानवीय घोषित कर देते हो और किसी को अमानवीय कह देना ही खुद में ही एक तरीके से हिरणात्मक भाषण कहलाया जाता है, जो आगे चल के काफी चांसेस हैं कि वो बड़े स्तर पे वायलेंस, हिंसा का रूप ले सकता है और एक समुदाय के खिलाफ ले सकता है। और ऑलरेडी जो भी समुदाय है पहले से जो वंचित है उसको आप और वंचितता की तरफ घसीटने की कोशिश करते हो। मैं घसीटने शब्द का इस्तेमाल इसलिए कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि वो बहुत ही डेलिबरेट स्टेप है, सोचा समझा चाल है, जहाँ पे आप एक समुदाय को और भी हिंसात्मक माहौल की तरफ घसीटने की कोशिश करते हैं, चाहे वो दलित समुदाय हो या आदिवासी समुदाय हो। खासतौर पर जब हम छुआछूत की बात करते हैं, अनुच्छेद 17 की बात करते हैं, आर्टिकल 17 जो अस्पृश्यता को बैन करता है, अस्पृश्यता के खिलाफ एक अधिकार प्रदान करता है, अस्पृश्यता मतलब छुआछूत, वो एक अधिकार हमारे संविधान में दिया हुआ है बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से। और उसको उसको भी कहीं ना कहीं आप जो है जात को, किसी की पहचान को इस्तेमाल कर रहे हो हेट स्पीच के, तो उसको मानवी ने बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से सामने लाया, जो भी स्टीरियोटाइप्स ऑफ बाइसनेस जुड़े हुए हैं इन सब से जुड़े। और खासतौर पे जैसा मानवी का काम रहा है कैंपेन्स अगेंस्ट हेट स्पीच को लेकर, काम जो है बहुत वो चैनल्स के लेकर है, और उन्होंने बोला है कि सिर्फ नेशनल मीडिया नहीं, जो स्टेट मीडिया है वो भी बहुत ज्यादा हेट स्पीच को प्रमोट करने में माहिर, क्योंकि जब आप डेटा देखेंगे, जब आप स्टैटिस्टिक्स देखेंगे, तो आपको पता चलेगा कि जो रीजनल चैनल्स हैं, जो रीजनल लैंग्वेज में चैलेंज है, खासतौर पे कन्नड़ा का एग्जांपल जो अभी दिया है मानवी ने, उसके माध्यम से भी बहुत सारा हेट स्पीच फैलाया गया है। और सिर्फ सिर्फ ऐसे नहीं, बहुत सारे आर्टिकल्स छपे हैं जहाँ पे कुछ आर्टिकल्स ने बहुत स्पष्ट रूप से बोला है कि जो मुस्लिम्स हैं वो एक बैड एप्पल इन बास्केट के तौर पे देखा गया है, और कहा गया है कि इनको हटाने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, नहीं तो एक उचित जनसंख्या, एक जीनोसाइड की कॉल किया गया है, और ये बोला गया है कि उनको हटाने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, नहीं तो वो पूरे समाज को, पूरे देश को खराब कर देंगे। कोरोना क्रिमिनल्स के नाम, जिस तरह उनको कोरोना क्रिमिनल्स का नाम दिया गया है, और कैसे पूरे कोविड को लेकर हम सब ने देखा, और वो सिर्फ सिर्फ निजामुद्दीन नहीं, कई बार हम जब हमारे साथी जो सब्जियां बेचते हैं या फिर कुछ फल बेचते हैं, अपनी रोजी रोटी चलाते हैं, उनको भी कैसे टारगेट किया गया विभिन्न तरीकों से, पुराने वीडियोस को दिखाकर और उसके माध्यम से हिट स्पीच। और ये सिर्फ मुस्लिम समुदाय नहीं, ये दलित समुदाय के खिलाफ भी काफी वर्षों से चलता चला आ रहा है, आदिवासी समुदाय के खिलाफ भी बहुत ज्यादा मजबूती से एक ये कैंपेन चला है उनके खिलाफ। तो उस पर भी बात करने की जरूरत है। और एक सेल्फ रेगुलेटरी बॉडी होती है हर मीडिया हाउस की, उसके बारे में मानवी ने बात की है, जहाँ पे वो खुद रेगुलेट करते हैं अपने एक्शंस को, कोड ऑफ एथिक्स को। और कई बार मानवी और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के माध्यम से एप्लीकेशंस फाइल किया, तो ऑब्वियसली अगर कोई खुद ही जो है इसको प्रमोट कर रहा है, तो वो स्टेप कभी नहीं लेगा इसके खिलाफ। सो बैक टू बैक एप्लीकेशंस हुए बट कुछ भी नहीं हुआ। बट लेकिन आप देखेंगे कि कई और केसेस फाइल किए हैं जिसके माध्यम से जो है एक्सेप्ट किया है, एक्नॉलेज किया है कोर्ट ने, दैट यस देयर हैज बीन अ हेट स्पीच which might lead to genocide. There are possibility that these hate speeches might lead to genocide. They have been asked to pay the compensation, they have been asked to pay the fine, but that's a very positive thing which has happened, and congratulations Manvi and team. Of course, the recent video which Manvi has shown to us, जिसमें मानवी ने बोला है, मतलब एक वीडियो कह रहा है कि एक न्यूज़ चैनल ने, रीजनल न्यूज़ चैनल ने बताया है कि नहीं, हमारी तरफ से गलती हुई है। लेकिन हमें ये देखना पड़ेगा कि क्या ये फाइन, क्या ये एक्नॉलेजमेंट कोर्ट की तरफ से सफिशिएंट है, पर्याप्त है, और क्या हम जब आगे मूव कर रहे हैं हेट स्पीच के खिलाफ लड़ाई की, तो किस हद तक ये जजमेंट्स, ये सपोर्ट हमारे काम आएगा। और फिर से मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और बहुत बहुत मुबारक देना चाहूँगा मानवी को इतना बेहतर काम करने के लिए। सो अभी जल्दी से कुछ सवाल ले लेते हैं। हमारे पास आखिरी के 10 से 12 मिनट हैं। हमारे पास 3 सवाल अभी तक आए हैं। पहला सवाल, और सभी साथियों से मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, प्लीज कुछ भी सवाल हैं तो आप चैट बॉक्स में डालें और उसका हम जवाब देने की कोशिश करेंगे। पहला सवाल एलोइसिस जी की तरफ से आया है। सेज हेट स्पीच इज नॉट टू बी ओवरलुक्ड at as merely a social behavioral problem, nor as a law and order problem, but more importantly as an issue that goes against the very essence of the Constitution, that is democracy, which calls for respect for pluralism, dignity of individual citizens, tolerance among citizens. In which cases, why doesn't the judiciary takes hate speech as a serious violation of the principle of Constitution? Is it because of political reasons or lack of better understanding of the issues or disregard for the basic tenet of the question? So this is one of the questions. So how should I read out all the questions, Manvi and Lara, or should we respond one by one?
Sure. We can read all of them out, and then Lara and I can both say which ones we want to take. Lara,
Sure.
that works?
Lara cannot unmute. I mean, Lara, wait. Lara has to be made the co-host.
Hi. Yeah, no, anything will do for me.
Okay, so this is question number 1. May I request Madhur to paste the questions in the chat box? Question number 1 by Father Aloy. Then we have question 2, which says the website for the government of Jharkhand and cultural describes the Asur people as primitive people, and their language as speaking Austroasiatic and demonic language. Can this be flagged as contentious hate speech? And we have one more question from Pina, which says, it is difficult to know the original sender of WhatsApp hate forward. Does that matter when reporting these messages? Is there a common collective space where hate speeches, crimes are being documented and citizens can contribute to? So yeah, you can also check the chat box, Manvi and Lara, and please, whoever wants to respond, please take a stage. Thank you.
I'll just start, and Lara, maybe you can add in after that. I think the question about judiciary, we were doing a workshop yesterday in person in Bangalore about fighting hate speech, and we were asking everybody to give us instances of these hate speeches, and it was really the instances that the participants picked were of the recent hate speech where Allahabad High Court judge spoke at a VHP meeting, calling Muslims hateful names. And previously in Karnataka itself, we have seen a High Court judge itself take call a particular area in Bangalore where largely Muslims reside as mini Pakistan. So, in that context, I don't think, in my understanding at least, that the judiciary is it can be seen as being out of the society, who's not consuming this hate or believing in this hate, uh, as individuals at least, and they are failing in their constitutional responsibility and the oath that they take every day with these kind of comments that have far-reaching consequences for the communities. That is the first aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that I it is very difficult to say conclusively as to what is the reason the judiciary is behaving in this apathetic but also complicit manner when it comes to hate speeches. But I think that is why public response and us responding from a space of constitutional morality, for those of us who you like rightly said want to protect this idea of pluralistic India and a democratic India, we have to highlight and put pressure on this judiciary through different advocacy means to be able to take the right legal action. The third aspect is also the struggle with the law in itself. When you read the sections of the law, when you read section 196 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, 197, 356, when you read these particular sections, something that is that many of us find problematic, and I think Lara will also agree that it does not see a difference between marginalized community and the majoritarian community. It does not see a difference between the any kind of political social powers that exist between these communities. So it just says hatred, promoting enmity between groups. It does not understand who can promote enmity, and by promoting enmity, who is marginalized and dehumanized further. So in the very language itself, there is something that there is the element which allows for the judiciary to also interpret that fact that hate speeches are possible against Hindus. Hate speeches are possible against, for basically calling out Brahminism, for example. So you see, these are the three layers in which one can possibly look at it. Lara, do you want to add something?
I'll just respond to the questions that you all have raised, which are quite specific. The first is that I think one of the questions that was raised, if I'm not mistaken, was on what the government.
Lara, should I read the question?
I can't find the third question. Anyway, all right. No, the website. Yeah, sorry. Website with the government of Jharkhand and okay. These are the three questions which have been put on the chat.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I thought you had read some other question about what is the government doing. Okay, all right. So the first question is on hate speech. Of course, hate speech, there's no doubt it is a serious violation of the principles of the Indian Constitution under Article 14 as well as Article 15 and also Article 25 and Article 21. These are really it actually hits at the root of the right to citizenship of an individual. because in most cases, as we see in terms of hate speech, it challenges the right of dignified existence of individuals, and also which affects the other rights. So, for instance, we've seen that most of the times those communities which have been subjected to hate speech are also denied many of their other valuable constitutional rights, whether it's their right to life and many of the rights that are associated with it. For instance, in many of the professions, even in legal profession, we have seen this happen at the time of appointment itself. If you have two series, one from a Muslim candidate and a Hindu candidate, and they're of the same qualifications, the chances of a Hindu candidate getting called by most of the firms is higher. I have myself seen such kind of discriminatory behavior in the profession I'm from, and there are many such levels of discrimination that we see. Is also coming from an embedded hate. It is coming from this kind of hate propaganda that has spread across, the community as well as across our generations. Many of the times, our parents feed onto it. People that we are working with feed onto it. They carry these biases, and this stigmatization, this exclusion, results to denial of several rights and services to people from these communities. So it's a really important thing to understand that it affects the constitutional rights, the right to life and dignity of the individuals. But in terms of why are we seeing that there is a real disregard of the issue? I think the question itself is I mean, the answer to this we all know. The political dispensation has not had the political will and intent to curb hate speech. In fact, we are seeing that in most cases, whether we see in Manipur, what happened in Manipur, you had Biren Singh making hate speech against cookies, calling them infiltrators, talking about narco-terrorism as though it was the cookies who were involved in narco-terrorism. Similarly, we have seen this kind of hate propaganda being spoken by leaders. We have seen that Yogi Adityanath came to Maharashtra before during the campaign of the state elections and spoke about kaatenge baatenge. And similarly, we've seen this happen in almost all of the election campaigns. One of the things that I missed, I mean, I didn't have time to talk about, there are many aspects, in fact, of advocacy that we do and that we can do as ordinary citizens. Like Manavi said, you don't need to be a lawyer to do any of this. Is also in the manner in which we have seen a flagrant violation of the Model Code of Conduct. The Model Code of Conduct, which is imposed on in a jurisdiction where elections are going to take place, and provides for curbs on hate speech and any kind of communal statements or incitement for votes. And we have seen that being violated election after election. The manner in which Ram Mandir was used during the general elections, we all know about it in most of our states that happened. The manner in which this whole the whole propaganda which has been behind the acceptance of the demolitions that have taken place under the bulldozer Raj. The matter also went to the Supreme Court. In fact, Nadeem has been targeted for a lot of the advocacy that they have done in courts. APCR had led that litigation on the demolitions that were taking place, which were pretty communally motivated, as well as they were punitive demolitions. So in this manner, we have seen how hate has normalized illegal actions, sometimes even by the government, and sometimes even by the ruling party, which has been behind many of these actions that have taken place. So the lack of political will and intent is clearly why we are seeing that there has been disregard of hate speech cases. And most importantly, there hasn't been enough action to prevent hate speech. If you know that there are people who are involved in hate speech, why are they being given a platform? As soon as the hate speech takes place, why is the hate speech not being stopped and the people indulging in hate speech being arrested? We see on the one hand, just celebrating a match where Pakistan has won on Facebook, gets young students arrested for months at end. And then on the other hand, where people are inciting the murder of Muslims, they are not being arrested. And these incitements are taking place in huge public rallies with thousands of people present. So there is clearly a lack of political will, and that can only change if we all start, doing very active, not just advocacy, but also start taking action at our local level against hate speech and condemning the spate of hate speech. This is resulting in, a complete a complete demolition or dilution of our constitution. So this is a very important part of the hate speech advocacy work. And like Manavi also said this, that which is very common, we hear that what can we do? Everyone is doing it. What kind of action can we take? But the truth is that it's only if we take action, and we've seen success when we've taken action. It has also led to some kind of pushback and some kind of accountability. So
sorry, Lara. Sorry, we might have to conclude because we have two more questions to be responded.
Yeah. Coming to the next question, the second part of it was in terms of the WhatsApp forwards. As far as the WhatsApp forwards are concerned, one of the biggest problem is to find the origin of these forwards. Like you said, this is something that only the cyber cell can do, and filing a cyber complaint in respect of such kind of hate speech is the way to actually go. But this is really not taken to its logical conclusion. We see that the originators of these kind of messages are not necessarily investigated upon or found. I also reported that where we've managed to file FIRs in many of the cases, the further investigation does not take place. So these things are a big challenge. However, if we are able to locate the furthest point, or if we are able to locate the first point at which the WhatsApp forward was received on a known group, if we are able to investigate that and we're able to provide the information that is available to us and try to push for the investigation, then that is one thing that one can do. As far as the common collective spaces are concerned, there are organizations that are working on hate speech, multiples of them. We are one organization. We have a thematic group in the organization that works on hate speech, but even otherwise, the state units work on hate speech. At state levels, there are many collective forms, like in Maharashtra, we have the Saroka Samiti. CJP is an organization that works here, does intense amount of work on hate speech. We have many such other organizations and collectives. And Hate Speech Beda is there. There are many citizens who are part of Hate Speech Beda, a campaign against hate, which Manavi is also part of, and many people have joined it at the Karnataka level. I think they also have reached at the national level. So these are the various places one can go to. But apart from that, there are also hate speech reporting that was being done actively by Hindutva Watch. You have also India Spend, which used to run a hate tracker. They were coming up with reports on hate speech in different states. You can check these resources out. I can also share some of the resources with the organizers, and they can forward it to the attendees.
There's one last.
Thank you, Lara. Thank you.
That last question, I think I can just quickly come in and then we can.
The government of Jharkhand one, yeah, sure.
Yes. I think there are people here from Jharkhand as well who can speak to the local context. But from somebody who's reading the language where a community is being referred to as demonic, I think an argument can be made for it to be hate speech itself. Because in my understanding itself, that to call an entire language as demonic is something that is dehumanizing to the language and to the people. So an argument can definitely be made. A representation can be filed before the Home Minister, I'm supposing, because it's on the website and they would be the ones responsible for it. But it is something that can be argued to be as hate speech. I will also just want to it can primitive. I'm not particularly sure if primitive can be used as can be understood as dehumanizing, because like you rightly said, it's been very popularly used for Adivasi and tribal communities. But maybe somebody who's done more work with the tribal communities can speak to the literature on that. I also just wanted to come in here and share about the how Madhur gave the context that this workshop was also to basically respond to the national call of fighting hate and defending democracy to stop the harassment of Naveen and Zubair. Many organizations are here who are participating in that call. I would like to share the open letter that we have written to the Prime Minister jointly, which we want to submit very soon, which is calling for action against this kind of harassment, to take action against the Delhi police specifically, to basically write to the UP police. We often think that these open letters don't have much meaning, but they've been accompanied with such kind of efforts of doing workshops of fighting hate and so on. So if you all can please circulate this and sign this, and if more of you would want to do these workshops, I think Madhur would be happy to sort of help figure that out. Yeah, that's it.
Manavi, I think Lara, last 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, add to this. Sorry, I missed that question. But as far as the word primitive is concerned, I think, it is important to challenge the, wording that has been used by the Jharkhand government and claim that it is hate speech, also because of the fact that it's not just about the word, but it's not about the word that has to be dehumanizing itself. It's about the feelings it incites. If you see what the section says, that if it incites a feeling of enmity, if it brings hatred upon the community, if it looks down upon them, that is what the test or the ingredient of hate speech is. So, for instance, one of the arguments that has been made is, just calling a community terrorist or jihadist. There have been arguments that said that just calling someone terrorist does not mean that they become a terrorist. But by calling someone terrorist, okay, you are, because they come from a particular community, okay, you are actually inciting hatred against that person because they belong to that community or against that community. And this is exactly what is happening in a case like this as well. By calling, Adivasis or people from the indigenous community primitive, what is also being done is there is a ill feeling, ill will that is being cultivated against members of the community, and the community is being lowered in the eyes of the majority community, which are the ingredients which the cases as well as the provisions of law talk about. So we have to try and test this. At the end of the day, we should not allow such words to be used by the government, and it is very important for us to challenge it. How the challenge finally goes, of course, will is not something that we can control, especially not in the political environment that we are in right now and the judiciary that we're dealing with. Like Manavi referred to, how some of the judges itself have been using terminologies such as this in their judgments or in open court. They have been making such observations. We are, fighting a very difficult fight, but at the same time, I think it's important to not let such instances go. So this should be challenged. I think this is an important thing. Thanks for flagging it out, Madhur.
Thank you, Lara, and thank you, Manavi, for giving us time. And of course, thanks to NAJAR for organizing this workshop. And I think let's move to the next step. I would suggest, would also request NAJAR to see if we can more or less, have a discussion, broad discussion, and we can take Lara's and Manavi's help in understanding what are the basic laws, and go deeper into the laws. I mean, we don't have much time now. We just had a 1.5 hours of this discussion workshop. Maybe we can plan a longer version of the workshop, and we actually discuss about very basic laws, how they can be, used, what is the process, complaint mechanisms, and what are the constitutional mechanisms we can use in filing an application. So that would be good if NAJAR can also take it up, and of course Madhur, who has been leading this whole process, can take it. So of course, yeah, I mean, as I conclude, there has been a major failure we have, in past 1.5 hours also, and also we have been witnessing to act decisively against hate speeches, which not only, emboldens perpetrators, but also leaves the victims, especially those from minorities, religious minorities, Muslims, Dalits, and Adivasis. And we had a good discussion on caste, indigenous people, and of course, the broad discussion which was around Zubair, Nadeem, and of course, religious minorities, which are the most vulnerable And thanks to the panel today, which has actually offered us an opportunity to not only highlight incidents of hate speeches and their devastating consequences, of course, but also to explore strategies to counter this rising tide of intolerance. As we move towards the end, we must demand accountability, justice, and an unwavering commitment, not only from the state but also amongst us as a citizens, amongst us as civil society organizations, amongst us as advocates of social justice, regardless of the caste and religious identity. और अंत में जैसा संविधान के सिद्धांतों से ही मैं बात करना चाहूँगा, हमारी सामूहिक आवाज एक जवाबदेही की तरफ मुड़े, न्याय की तरफ मुड़े और हर व्यक्ति की सुरक्षा की तरफ मुड़नी चाहिए, चाहे वो किसी भी धर्म का हो, चाहे वो किसी भी जात का हो. So let's engage more in similar conversations, more in similar dialogues, and restore and protect the basic faith back in the preamble of the Indian Constitution to have an inclusive and just society. Thank you very much, Lara. Thank you very much, Manavi. And thanks to everyone who was part of this process. Thank you.
Everyone.